Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today we're getting into our start and sit wide receivers for week 11 of fantasy football season. I'll be going through each and every matchup this week and telling you which players you should be starting, which players you should be sitting. We'll cover every single player you might be considering playing this week in fantasy football. If you guys do enjoy today's video, I would appreciate if you hit that like button for me as well. Subscribe to the channel if you are new as we get into what is this, third quarter, fourth quarter of your fantasy football regular season. So hopefully we can help you get a W this week. Let's get into these matchups. We're going to start at Lambeau Field with the Chargers and the Packers, a Chargers defense that continues to struggle, whether it's on the ground or whether it's against the pass. They have just not been good this season. They are 28th in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position, 25th in EPA against the pass. So it should be an awesome matchup here for Jordan Love to get things on track. He was a player that I talked about on our waiver wire video as someone to stream this week. As for the Packers defense, right now, they're 4th in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. I think a lot of it comes down to what they've given up in the ground game. Opportunity for the Chargers to get right on the ground. They haven't run it effectively. I don't think this is like an overwhelmingly good defense against the pass. They're 20th in EPA against the pass. They're not as good as what some of these, or what the fantasy number indicates, and they don't have much of a pass rush. So I do think the Chargers will have success offensively. Just for them, going to be about who is healthy and available. Keenan Allen was able to get back onto the field, so I do expect him to play this week. And with him starting, you obviously are going to be playing him. And then that puts Quentin Johnston, Jalen Guyton as players that it's a little bit too risky to consider playing them. Guyton in like a 14-team league, 16-team league should definitely be added because, again, Allen's injury is something to monitor. And if Quentin Johnston's not going to break out, someone needs to, because we also see Gerald Everett on the injury report too. I'm not quite there with Johnson yet. We're still waiting to see it before we want to play him. As for the Packers side of things, Christian Watson was a guy I loved last week, and he absolutely busted despite having a couple of end zone targets, leading the team in targets. The Chargers are another good matchup. I know it'd be hard to do it, but this is a matchup where I would consider playing him. And then same goes for Romeo Doubs, who's someone who's a little bit more consistently getting opportunities, especially I talked about Watson getting red zone looks. Dobbs is getting a ton of them as well. So I think both these guys you could start. Honestly, you could start any of these guys. This is really just who you prefer or who you like. I can understand sitting all of them, but the matchup is so good here that even Jaden Reed, who's had a good couple of weeks recently, is someone to play as well. Titans at the Jaguars. Got an AFC South matchup here for two defenses that I've got a good feel for. They both have been great against the run, but have not been good against the pass. They've seen a ton of volume against it. These teams are 26th and 25th in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Expect these quarterbacks to be throwing the ball plenty in this game, and that's going to give you opportunities to play these wide receivers. Now, with DeAndre Hopkins, he's someone I do love in this matchup. We're going to have no Treylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, Nick Westbrook-Ikine. They're not players that I would really seriously consider playing. Kyle Phillips, if I was in a real pinch with buys or I'm in a deeper league, I could see it. I had to do it in like a 14-teamer that was 2 quarterbacks and a ton of flex spots. I picked him up and played him, but otherwise not someone I would really consider as like a top 40 type of guy. The Jags, Calvin Ridley, I think, could have some success here against this Titans defense that, since they traded Kevin Byard, have not been great against receivers on the outside. So I'm looking for Ridley to potentially have a big game here after a bit of a dud last week against the Niners. And then Christian Kirk is really a weekly guy to be starting. Zay Jones might be back in this one. I see he's at on the practice field, but I wouldn't be playing him even if he does start. Giants Commanders. The Tommy DeVito experience rolls on in New York. Makes the Giants a team that you really don't have to talk much about when it comes to fantasy assets, catching passes. But for the Commanders, really high volume passing offense. 30th in fantasy points allowed are the Giants, one of the worst coverage grades in the league too, and the 24th in EPA against the pass. So got an opportunity here for Sam Howell to produce in the air for this offense. We'll be curious to see his numbers against the blitz have started to improve, so confident that he can continue to do what he's been doing. But again, the Giants are just a team, a dead team walking at this point. So it's going to be very easy to be sitting all of your Giants receivers. I know it's technically a good matchup against the Commanders, who are one of the worst in the league in fantasy points allowed at the position. Does not matter. This is still going to be Saquon Barkley and very little of the passing game. But on the Commanders side of things, Terry McLaurin is someone I do want to start. I think Curtis Samuel is going to be back this week, so him and Dotson are players that I do want to sit, because again, this is a Giants team that you don't have to do a whole hell of a lot to beat them. This was a really low-scoring game the last time these two teams played. And again, these divisional opponents, that tends to happen. So I do still want to play McLaurin, but the other two options, there's just too much going around between these two. De'Ami Brown. We also have, obviously, Logan Thomas as well. These backs are getting involved in the receiving game too, so I'm not there with any of the other options beyond McLaurin. Raiders at the Dolphins. We've got a Dolphins team that's really starting to improve their performance defensively against the pass. They're now top 10 in EPA against the pass. More middle of the road in fantasy points allowed, 17th. This is the strength of their defense is against the pass, and I think that will continue here against this Raiders team. The Raiders have been a team that a lot of opponents have run the ball really effectively on. They've actually been pretty good pass defense-wise. They're continuing to move up here in these rankings. They're 6th in fantasy points allowed. It's not a team that I think this is completely by the fact that they are a really good pass defense. I think a little bit has to do with the fact they've been brutal against the run and teams aren't throwing it as much on them. So it doesn't really deter me with these Dolphins assets. It's going to be status quo here with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as guys that I'm definitely going to be starting. Cedric Wilson, not someone I'm going to be considering in this matchup. And then with the Raiders, it was good to see with Pierce taking over as the head coach of making a point of, hey, let's get the ball to our number one guy, and that is Devontae Adams. I think even if the Dolphins coming with a really solid pass defense, I'm still going to be wanting to play him because I think the volume will be there for him. And as well, this is a Dolphins team that can really put up points. So we're going to see a game script where the Raiders will need to throw the football. But for Myers, Renfro, those are guys I'm not really quite there yet on at the current time. Cardinals at the Texans. This game preseason probably didn't seem like a lot of fun, but I'm actually very excited for this game between Kyler Murray and CJ Stroud. I definitely think that Murray's arrival here makes this Cardinals team a lot different of an approach when you're looking at your fantasy assets because they're going to be able to compete and keep up. Right now in the season, the Cardinals defensively have not been good, though. 29th in EPA against the pass, 59.2 coverage grade, don't have much talent in the pass rush. So I definitely like what CJ Stroud can do with some time to operate in the pocket. The Texans have been a team that PFF I know really likes their coverage unit. The fantasy points have them at the top 10 unit against wide receivers. But overall, I don't think this is a unit to be too scared of. I still believe in Murray to be able to move the ball effectively against it. The real tough part for me is what do I do with these pass catchers? Trey McBride, someone you absolutely want to start coming off the big week. I'm going to go to Marquise Brown again because I do still think this is the number one option in this offense. Rondell Moore saw some good volume. I'm not going to be able to go to him just because he's someone who has such a low average depth of target that he's got to do a lot with the opportunities that he gets when it comes to yards after the catch to be fantasy viable, and he's not much of a red zone target, so I don't feel confident going to him quite yet. If this continues, will be a different story. And then Michael Wilson is more in that wide receiver 3 in this offense, or the third pass catcher, even with more potentially could back into like the 4th pass catcher. So I like the matchup. I don't love it enough. I still got to learn a little bit more about this Cardinals offense with Murray operating things. On the Texans side, I think Noah Brown isn't going to play. He did not practice on Friday either, so I would kind of be surprised he didn't practice all week that he would play on Sunday. That means we'll have Robert Woods as an option, but I am going to be sitting him. But Dell and Collins against this Cardinals defense I think are going to be great starts for you, so those are 2 guys I do want to play. Bears at the Lions. We're getting Justin Fields back for the Chicago offense. It should be interesting to see what they can do with this Lions team getting absolutely torched by the Chargers last week. Can Fields do anything similar to that? We'll be telling when we look at this Lions defense. Definitely think they're great against the run. Both these teams I think are actually great against the run, but have not been good against the pass. 23rd in fantasy points allowed are the Lions now. Coverage grade has really fallen off from the beginning of the year. And the Bears, the numbers don't completely indicate it. They're middle of the road fantasy points allowed, but 32nd, dead last in EPA against the pass. I'm very confident with this Lions team. They'll find nearly similar success throwing the football that they did against the Chargers last week. So feel good about the Lions, and then it'll be interesting to see where Justin Fields is at, obviously coming off the thumb injury. So it's going to kind of be status quo here with the Bears. DJ Moore, I'm going to definitely be willing to go back to with Fields back at quarterback. But when it comes to Darnell Mooney and now the emergence of Tyler Scott in this offense, those are players that I'm not going to take the chance on despite the good matchup. Same kind of goes with the Lions. We're seeing Josh Reynolds, who's on the field a lot, not getting enough targets with the amount of routes he's running. It just does not correlate well. Jameson Williams got on the field a little bit more than usual, which was great. He found some production with his opportunities that he had against the Chargers, but it's just not enough for me to want to play him. And it's the clear 3 behind, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, we have Sam Laporta, we have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, capable pass catchers. I know it's a great matchup, but I just can't get there with feeling confident in these 2 guys. So I do want to sit both Reynolds and Williams here. Steelers at the Browns. This game was at week 2, was an absolute roller coaster. And now we've got Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback. I guess the Browns are seeing this as the more long-term investment, like Walker being the plug-in guy and then DTR being someone that they kind of want to see if they can build something around him and see more upside. So I guess I get why they want to play him. But man, This is going to be a complete and utter disaster, this game, I think, entirely. The Browns are an elite defense. They're going to rely on it in this game. Top 3 in fantasy points allowed, the number 1 defense in EPA against the pass, a tantalizing pass rush to make things miserable for Kenny Pickett in this passing offense. And the Steelers. They're top 10 in EPA. They've given up a lot of fantasy points to the wide receiver position. They give up some explosive plays to those receivers on the outside, but they're also really bad against the run. So I think the Browns will probably lean on their ground game here, take care of the football, because DTR did not do a good job taking care of the football the last game he was starting. So overall, with these offenses, I'm not feeling good. And it reflects here in what we're going to do with all of these receivers. I'm sitting out every last one of them. There's just no way I'm playing any of these guys. I don't like Deontay Johnson against man coverage. The Browns like to play a lot of man coverage. And then I just can't trust the fact that the Browns are going to let Dorian Thompson-Robinson throw the ball too much. I think the Browns will win this game. I think they'll find a lot of success on the ground. And I think that means low volume and a just complete utter lack of production from their receivers when it comes to Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore. So I'm sitting everybody in this matchup. I can't touch them. Cowboys at the Panthers. Another big spread here for the Cowboys to cover. A Panthers team that's been brutal against the run, but hasn't quite been as bad against the pass. They're 7th in fantasy points allowed this season. And then when you get to that Cowboys offense, I mean, not great for Bryce Young going from what you'd expect to be an opportunity to put up some points against the Bears defense last week to now going to Dallas. So this is going to be a spot where I think the Panthers are in a lot of trouble. But again, I don't think the Cowboys will lean too much on their pass game to get out in front here. It could be a lot of the run. And then for the Panthers, I mean, just pick your poison with this team. There's not going to be a lot of success, I think, offensively. They've just been absolutely terrible. They're just not a lot of looks to make the plays downfield. And if you're getting a pass rush like this, those opportunities are going to be even less. So when it comes to what we're going to do at this position with our wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb, I do want to start. Brandon Cooks had the big week. I know. Came out of nowhere, was ready to, for a lot of people, they just dropped him because he was doing absolutely nothing. I'm not going to take that performance from last week and immediately go back to him. Again, I think this is a matchup where they don't really need this. Obviously, they didn't need it against the Giants, but he still produced in a big way. I expect the ground game to be more of a focus here. I think it's just a little bit too risky with Cooks or Gallup. Those are guys I want to sit. Thielen continues to get the volume. I think you can still play him because, again, he's going to be in those short yardage areas. Young's going to have very little time to operate. There's going to be enough here in PPR formats to play him. Then the other wide receivers are absolute must-sits here. Now we got the Bucs on the road in San Francisco at the 49ers. This should be a really interesting matchup when it comes to, I was really going back and forth on what to do with the receivers for the Bucs because I have a major problem with their pass protection. The Niners have a great pass rush, one of the best in the league. Is there going to be enough for Baker Mayfield to be able to operate in this offense? You're going to see a lot of too high. You're going to see a lot of zone coverage from the 49ers. It's going to limit, I think, the chance for Mike Evans to be as explosive as he was last week, but he's been great against zone coverage this year. That's the vast majority of where his production has come from. And then for the 49ers, this is a game where you're going to lean on the pass and Brock Purdy, more similarly to what we saw last week actually against the Jags. So I expect there to be plenty of success in the receiving game for all their pass catchers because, again, the Bucs great against the run. 29th, though, in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, have not been anywhere near as good against the pass. So this is where you beat them. And that means Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel are great starts for you. Absolutely got to have them in your lineup. I'm going to start Mike Evans and Chris Godwin just because Evans has been good against zone. And for Godwin being that guy available more in the shorter areas of the field with the 49ers' ability to generate pressure, there could be enough here for Godwin. And again, passing volume will be high here. That's going to elevate the floor of both of these guys. Seahawks at the Rams. The Rams got the better of the Seahawks in week 1 earlier this year, and it's because the Rams have been great. McVay's offense is great against zone coverage. We saw the success they had against the Seahawks, and then the game against the 49ers that they really stayed in, it was because of those zone coverage looks. Seahawks play a ton of zone. I think you're going to see with Matthew Stafford back, if he is 90% healthy, if he's 80% healthy, there's going to be enough here for these pass catchers to chew on when it comes to fantasy production. As for the Seahawks, It's tough with these guys in terms of just a lot of up and down from DK Metcalf. Lockett's been a little bit more consistent. The Rams are a team that I do think you're going to have some success moving the ball against them in the air. They have the worst coverage grade in the league, although they are top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Again, they're 27th in EPA against the pass. This isn't a great defense by any means, in my opinion. I think we're going to see some success here from Geno Smith, a bounce back opportunity here for this offense. So I definitely think both of these teams, you could see them finding success through the air. That's going to put me in the spot to play both Cooper Kupp, and I know Puka Nacua has been underwhelming the last few weeks. I think you can start him here because, again, been great against zone coverage, both of these guys. DK, Lockett, two guys I do want to start, again, because I do think that this is going to be a game where they'll find success moving the ball through the air. I think the Rams are a little bit better against the run. And for Jackson Smith and Jigba, just, again, the volume needs to be higher for a guy whose average depth of target is just not very high. We've got another week 1 rematch, the Jets at the Bills, a Bills team that's been offensively, there's enough for you from a fantasy perspective, but just success-wise, just been a disaster. And then for the Jets, their offense has been absolutely brutal the last couple of weeks, just failing to find the end zone for, I don't know, it's been a number of quarters now. Zach Wilson just doesn't have much going when it comes to this team for this team offensively. And again, the pass rush or the pass protection's been a huge problem too. The Bills can definitely take advantage of that. But Wilson did have some success against the Bills in that week 1 matchup. Will be interesting to see if he can find it here. But again, the Jets defense is always the story. Number 1 in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position, one of the best coverage, I think the best coverage grade in the NFL, and 6th in EPA against the pass. So can Josh Allen do enough to take care of the football? And who will we see produce for the Bills in this game? I have faith that you're still going to see Stephon Diggs be the same guy he is each and every week. Dalton Kincaid has had an impact on Gabe Davis and I think also the injury to Dawson Knox had an impact on Gabe Davis because they're running more 3 wide receiver sets. Khalil Shakir is getting on the field. He's been effective for this team offensively too, and Kincaid has turned into that number 2 target. Very tough matchup against this Jets defense. Gabe Davis is a guy I do want to sit in this matchup. And then for the Jets, it's pretty much always every week, Garrett Wilson only. I think Wilson will play this week, and if he does, I would be starting him here against the Bills. Time for Sunday Night Football. Vikings at the Broncos. Two teams that are turning things around here on their season. The Vikings with the win over the Saints, the Broncos with the win over the Bills on Monday night. The Vikings are pretty straightforward when it comes to their defense. They're blitzing a lot. They're great against the run. They have not been quite as good against the pass. I was looking into Russell Wilson's numbers. They're not terrible. They're just barely into the bottom half of the league in terms of completion percentage and yards per attempt against the blitz. So I'm a little bit worried, but not crazy worried. I still think we can find enough here, and it will be on him in this game because I don't think they'll run the ball as effectively as they have been in recent weeks. And then on the Broncos side, I think a lot of teams have figured out that this is a Broncos team that is just absolutely atrocious against the run. They're undoubtedly the worst run defense in the entire league. And there's a little bit of talent, like with a guy like Pat Surtain in the secondary, there's a little bit of talent in the secondary as to why they're like middle of the road in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. But again, this still is not a great unit. So across the board, I do think the Vikings will find success here with Dobbs at quarterback. So Jordan Addison is someone I think you can go to in this matchup because, again, I think the Vikings find success on the ground. Probably going to be with Ty Chandler, so I don't think they'll lean on him in like a 20-plus carry type of role. But I do think there'll be enough volume here in the pass game for Addison to find success. Osborne looks like he will play, and Brandon Powell, those are two guys I'm not trusting right now. I need Kirk Cousins at quarterback to be able to go to the third pass catcher when you have TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. On the Broncos side, Jared Jeudy off the down week. He's been a guy I've been consistently sitting. The Vikings here are a game where the pass volume will have to increase. So I'm kind of elevating Jeudy here as a guy I can feel comfortable starting, and Sutton is just that go-to guy when this team gets into the red zone. And in a matchup that's going to require some good passing volume, feel great about him this week. Prime time, getting a good game. Eagles, Chiefs. I'm excited for this one, getting it on Monday night, especially after the Bengals-Ravens game was a bit of a letdown with the Burrow injury. Super excited for this one. The Eagles giving up the most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. They're the best run defense in the league. Teams are looking to throw the ball a ton. It's not because they're a terrible unit. It's just because the volume is so high from their opponents. As for the Chiefs, falling back to earth a little bit when it comes to some of these metrics against the pass and the run, but still the number 2 defense in pass EPA. So be interesting to see what this defense can do. This Chiefs defense can do to generate some pressure on Jalen Hurts, who's someone who's playing banged up. You know, he's been limited in terms of what he's done in the rushing game. So you'll see more pure dropbacks here, and we're going to see what Jalen Hurts is made of when it comes to this pass rush from the Chiefs. Now, as good as the matchup is for the Chiefs passing offense, or I shouldn't say matchup, I should say opportunity is because the volume will be high. That doesn't put me in a spot where anyone else other than Rashee Rice from the wide receivers are guys I want to consider starting. It's just too much of a mixed bag between Justin Watson, MVS, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, you name it. There's just a number of guys getting on the field, but Rice has been super consistent. He's been one of the best waiver wire adds we've had since the midpoint of the season. So very, very excited about him in this matchup. As for the Eagles, not a lot to get into when it comes to past A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. With Dallas Goedert out, it's definitely going to help Smith, who's been a bit of a letdown this season compared to where his first 4 or 5 weeks were. So expect him to have a solid week here against his Chiefs defense. Okay, that's every single matchup for week 11 of the fantasy football season. Guys, if you have any questions about these players or comparisons of guys you might be sitting or starting, I'm happy to answer as many as I can in the comments section down below. Would love to hear from you there. Enjoy week 11 of fantasy football, and we will see you guys on the next one.